I didn't know my entire relationship was about to be exposed in the most humiliating way possible, standing in an airport security line, surrounded by strangers, fluorescent lights overhead, and an officer who was just doing his job. My boyfriend leaned in close, his fingers tightening around my arm, his voice sharp and controlled. "Don't speak," he whispered. "You embarrass me in front of officials." The officer looked up at us. I stopped mid-sentence. In that moment, I understood exactly where I stood. I stepped back, said nothing, and let him take over. What he didn't realize, what I didn't realize either, was that the real problem hadn't started at the counter or even in that security line. It started the moment the officer asked him for something he didn't have. My name is Emily. I'm 34 years old. I've been with my boyfriend for almost 3 years. We live together. We planned a 2-week trip across Europe, nice hotels, multiple countries, a vacation we'd talked about for months like it was a reward for surviving work, stress, life. From the outside, we looked like a polished couple, successful, organized, put together. But that morning at the airport, while I was carrying both of our bags and he was glued to his phone, something cracked open that I couldn't ignore anymore. He'd always cared about appearances, about looking professional, controlled, superior. He hated when I joked with waiters or chatted with cashiers, said it made us look common. I told myself he was just particular, just stressed, just different from me. I used to work in customer service and hospitality before moving into project management. Talking to people, especially in tense situations, was literally my job. I knew how to de-escalate, how to explain, how to smooth things over. But in his world, that wasn't a strength. It was embarrassing. When he told me to stay quiet in front of that officer, something inside me finally went silent too. Not out of fear, but out of clarity. Because the truth is, being told to shut up wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing how often I'd already been doing it for him. 2 days later, when we walked into our hotel room overseas, I wasn't thinking about sightseeing or vacations anymore. I was thinking about whether this relationship could survive the moment I stopped making myself smaller, and whether he was capable of seeing me as an equal or only as someone who made him look good when things went perfectly. Before that airport moment, before the whisper that cut deeper than any argument we'd ever had, our relationship looked solid, at least on paper. I was 34. I'd spent years working in customer service and hospitality before transitioning into project management. That background shaped me in ways I didn't fully appreciate until much later. I knew how to read people, how to calm tense situations, how to speak to authority figures without escalating things. When something went wrong, my instinct was always to communicate, not dominate. My boyfriend Ryan came from a very different place. He worked in corporate communications, the kind of role where perception mattered almost as much as reality. He was polished, articulate, always conscious of how things looked from the outside. Image wasn't just important to him, it was currency. We met at a friend's dinner party almost 3 years ago. Nothing dramatic, no sparks flying across the room, just easy conversation that stretched longer than expected. We laughed, exchanged stories, discovered we shared the same dry sense of humor. A few weeks later, we were dating. The first year was good, comfortable. We moved in together after 12 months, settling into a routine that felt grown-up and stable. He handled bookings, reservations, anything that involved presentation. I handled logistics, transportation, timing, backup plans. It worked because we trusted each other's strengths. Or at least I thought we did. Looking back, the signs were always there. Small, dismissible moments that I waved away because love makes you generous with explanations. He hated when I chatted with waiters, rolled his eyes when I joked with cashiers, winced when I made small talk in lines. "Why do you need to talk to everyone?" he'd ask. "You don't have to be so friendly. It makes us look common." I told myself he was just particular, that he liked control because his job demanded it, that my easygoing nature probably stressed him out. We planned the Europe trip for months, 2 weeks, multiple countries, nice hotels, his picks, detailed itineraries, my contribution. We joked about how we balanced each other out. The morning we left, I carried both our bags through the terminal while he texted coworkers about some last-minute crisis. When we reached the check-in line, I started chatting with the guy behind us. Harmless small talk. Ryan elbowed me. "Can you not?" he muttered. "Not what?" "Be so loud. You don't need to make friends with everyone." I went quiet. It wasn't worth starting a fight before an international flight, I told myself. I didn't realize then that this was already the pattern, me shrinking to keep the peace, him mistaking silence for agreement. By the time we reached security, that pattern was about to be exposed in front of strangers. And once that happened, there was no unseeing it. The tension didn't arrive all at once. It seeped in through moments so small they felt petty to acknowledge, the kind you tell yourself don't matter, until they start stacking up. At the airport check-in line, I felt it again. 20 minutes of standing still, fluorescent lights humming, people shifting impatiently around us. I did what I've always done in lines like that. I talked. Just light conversation with the man behind us, where he was headed, how long his flight was. Nothing invasive, nothing inappropriate. Ryan's elbow pressed into my side. "Can you not?" he muttered, without looking at me. "Not what?" I asked quietly. "Be so loud. You don't need to make friends with everyone." I stopped talking. Not because he was right, but because I didn't want to start our trip with an argument. I told myself I could let this one go, that it wasn't worth it. At the counter, the airline agent, a young woman who looked overwhelmed, asked for our documents. Ryan's phone rang. He answered it immediately, launching into a work conversation and turning his back on the agent like she didn't exist. She looked at me. "I need both passports, please." I reached for mine. Ryan covered the phone with his hand. "I've got this. Just wait." He went back to his call. The agent waited. The people behind us shifted and sighed. I could feel eyes on us, the quiet irritation building. When Ryan finally hung up, he handed over both passports without apologizing for the delay. The agent typed for a moment, then frowned. "There's an issue with your booking." Ryan stiffened. "What issue?" "The name on your ticket doesn't exactly match your passport. There's a middle initial on the ticket that's not on your passport." "That's ridiculous," he snapped. "I booked this months ago." "I understand," the agent said calmly, "but for international travel, the names have to match exactly. I can try to fix it, but it may take some time." "How much time?" "About 30 minutes. I'll need to contact booking support." Ryan turned to me, his eyes sharp. "Did you double-check the booking?" "You made the booking," I said quietly. "But you were supposed to review everything." I didn't argue. People were definitely listening now. The agent moved us aside to help other passengers while she worked on the issue. We stood there with our bags at our feet while Ryan paced and made angry calls to customer service. Every time I offered a suggestion, rebooking, paying a fee, finding an alternate flight, he cut me off. "I don't need your help," he snapped. "I'm handling it." 30 minutes turned into an hour. Our flight was in 2 hours. Ryan's frustration spilled outward, at the agents, at me, at anyone who crossed his path. When I suggested grabbing coffee and taking a breath, he told me to stop being useless. That word lodged itself somewhere deep in my chest. By the time the ticket was finally fixed and we rushed towards security, I wasn't just stressed. I was bracing myself. Because something told me this wasn't about travel anymore. It was about control and how easily I was losing my place beside him when things stopped going perfectly. Security was where everything finally collapsed. The line was long, moving slowly, the kind of line that makes every minute feel heavier than the last. We were already cutting it close. I could feel the clock ticking in my chest, each beat louder than the one before. Ryan was in front of me, unloading his things into the plastic bins with sharp, impatient movements. I followed, still carrying both our bags, still silent. That silence felt different now. Not peaceful, not strategic. It felt like I was holding my breath. Then one of the officers stepped forward. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside for additional screening." Ryan froze. "Why?" "Random selection," the officer said calmly. "It'll just take a moment." "I don't have a moment," Ryan snapped. "Our flight board's in 40 minutes. "I understand," the officer replied evenly. "This won't take long." Ryan turned to me, his eyes hard. "Tell them we're going to miss our flight." Instinct kicked in. This was exactly the kind of situation I knew how to handle. Clear explanation, calm tone, human connection. I opened my mouth to speak, already forming the sentence in my head. Ryan grabbed my arm. He leaned in close, his voice low and sharp, meant only for me. "Don't speak," he whispered. "You embarrass me in front of officials." The officer looked up. I stopped mid-sentence. Something in me went still, not angry, not shocked, just clear. I stepped back, let go of my words, let go of the urge to fix it. I looked at Ryan and said quietly, "Okay." And I meant it. I watched him take over, argue, negotiate, demand a supervisor. The officer remained calm, professional, unmoved. The screening was mandatory. There was no shortcut, no leverage. Then the officer turned back to Ryan. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass again?" Ryan handed it over confidently. The officer looked at it, then at his screen, then back at Ryan. "This boarding pass is for yesterday's flight." Silence. Absolute suffocating silence. Ryan snatched the pass back, stared at it, and I watched the realization spread across his face. The color drained. His hands started to shake. "That's impossible," he said. "I printed it this morning." "No, sir," the officer said. "This flight departed yesterday." We had rebooked after the name issue. In the chaos, Ryan had printed the old boarding pass, the wrong one. "Where's the new boarding pass?" the officer asked. Ryan fumbled for his phone, scrolling frantically. People stared. Time bled away. Finally, he found the confirmation email. "You'll need to return to the ticket counter and have a new boarding pass printed," the officer said. "You can't proceed without it." "Our flight board's in 35 minutes, Ryan whispered. "Then I suggest you hurry," the officer replied. Ryan turned to me. There was no apology in his eyes, no embarrassment, just anger, as if this, too, was somehow my fault. "Why didn't you check this?" he snapped. I met his gaze, calm in a way that surprised even me. "You told me not to speak," I said. "You said I embarrass you." "That's not," he started. "You took the documents," I continued. "You told me to stay out of it." People were watching. The officer was waiting for us to move. Ryan grabbed his things and stormed back toward the counter. I followed, carrying both our bags again. And as I walked behind him, something shifted permanently. This wasn't about travel mistakes anymore. This was about respect. And once you see its absence this clearly, there's no pretending it's not a problem. We made it to the gate with 10 minutes to spare. 10 minutes of breathless running, shoes slapping against the terminal floor, sweat collecting at my temples while Ryan walked ahead of me in tight, furious strides. Neither of us said a word. There was nothing left to say, not yet. On the plane, he took the window seat, shoved his earbuds in, and turned his head away from me. 8 hours of silence stretched between us, broken only by the hum of the engines and the occasional rustle of snack wrappers. I stared at the seat back in front of me, replaying the moment in security over and over, the whisper, the officer's glance, the way my voice had died in my throat. I wasn't crying. I was cataloging. Every time he'd cut me off, every time he'd blamed me for something he controlled, every time I'd carried the weight, literal and emotional, while being told I was the problem. By the time we landed, exhaustion had settled deep into my bones. At the hotel, the room was exactly what Ryan had wanted. Modern, expensive, a view that begged to be photographed. He went straight to the shower without a word. I sat on the edge of the bed, still fully dressed, listening to the water run and feeling something inside me harden into resolve. When he came out wrapped in a robe, his tone was calmer, controlled. "That was a disaster," he said. "Yeah," I replied. "It was." "The airline really messed up with the ticket," he continued. "The middle initial thing shouldn't have happened." "You made the booking," I said carefully. "But sure, they could have caught it." He sat beside me. "I'm sorry," I snapped. I was stressed. "You told me I embarrass you." "I didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it?" I asked. He hesitated. "You have this way of talking to people, like they're your friends. It's not always appropriate, especially with officials. You need to let me handle those situations." I looked at him, really looked at him. "You printed the wrong boarding pass," I said evenly. "You missed your own booking error. But I'm the one who embarrasses you?" "Are we really doing this now?" he said, irritated. "We're on vacation." "We need to do this now," I replied, "because this isn't just stress." That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the officer's face when Ryan whispered at me. The quiet judgment, the public smallness of it all. By morning, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't about airports. It was about how easily he dismissed me and how long I'd allowed it. The next few days felt like walking on cracked glass. We did all the things we were supposed to do. Museum tickets, long walks through old streets, carefully chosen restaurants. But everything underneath was tense, brittle, waiting to snap. Every interaction with another person became a silent test, and somehow I kept failing them in his eyes. At a restaurant on our second night, I tried ordering in the local language. I'd been practicing for weeks. My accent wasn't perfect, but the waiter smiled, nodded, clearly appreciating the effort. Ryan cut in immediately. "He'll have the chicken. I'll have the fish. Thank you." The waiter hesitated, confused, then wrote it down and left. I stared at Ryan. "Why did you do that?" "Don't do that again," he said flatly. "Do what?" "Try to speak the language. Your pronunciation is terrible. You're making us look ignorant." I was trying to be respectful. "You were trying to show off. There's a difference." Something twisted in my stomach. I let it go. Again. At a museum the next day, I struck up a conversation with the tour guide about an exhibit. I'd read about it beforehand, was genuinely interested. The guide seemed happy to talk. Ryan pulled me aside. "Stop monopolizing him," he whispered sharply. "Other people have questions." "No one else is asking anything." "That's not the point. You're being obnoxious." Every word I spoke felt monitored. Too loud, too friendly, too curious, too much. By day 4, it wasn't subtle anymore. It was constant. At a train station, I started walking toward an information desk. "Where are you going?" Ryan asked. "To ask for help. I'm not sure which platform we need." "I can read the board. We don't need help." "The board's in another language. I know what I'm doing." He didn't. We got on the wrong train. 2 stops later, we had to get off, backtrack, and lose nearly an hour. He didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge it at all, acted like it was just bad luck. That night, lying in bed beside him, staring at the ceiling, something inside me reached a breaking point. This wasn't about travel stress. This wasn't about perfection. This was about control, and how small he seemed to need me to be for him to feel comfortable. I realized then that we couldn't keep pretending this was fine, that love without respect turns into resentment faster than you expect. I decided we were going to have a real conversation when we got home, whether he was ready for it or not. Day 5 was the lowest point of the trip. Not because something dramatic happened, but because nothing did, and the pattern was impossible to ignore anymore. We had another flight that morning to the next country. Different airport, different airline, same roles. Ryan handled the documents. I carried both bags. We barely spoke. At the check-in counter, the agent asked for our IDs. Ryan handed them over. The agent typed, smiled, and said, "Everything looks good. You're all set." No issues, no delays, no mistakes. And yet, the silence between us felt heavier than it had during the chaos of the first airport. We made it through security without incident and sat at the gate, surrounded by strangers laughing, scrolling, living their lives. I watched families, couples leaning into each other, sharing headphones, whispering jokes. I felt like I was sitting next to a stranger who happened to know all my weak points. "Can we talk?" I finally said. Ryan exhaled sharply. "About what?" "About the airport. About this whole trip. About how you've been treating me." He rubbed his face. "I've been stressed. Work has been insane. This trip was supposed to be relaxing, and instead everything went wrong." "Everything went wrong because you wouldn't let me help," I said quietly. "You told me I embarrass you." I was upset. I didn't mean it. "You've spent this entire trip criticizing everything I do," I continued. "Every word I say, every interaction I have. That's not just stress." He didn't answer right away. Then, softer, "I know I can be controlling sometimes." "Sometimes?" I asked. He looked down at his hands. "Okay, a lot. But it's because I care about how things go." "At my expense," I said. "I'm not your employee. I'm your partner." The words hung there between us. For a moment, I thought he might deflect again. Blame work. Blame travel. Blame timing. Instead, his shoulders slumped. "You're right," he said quietly. "I've been treating you like you work for me instead of like we're in this together." My chest tightened, not with relief, but with exhaustion. "So what do we do?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I don't want to lose you over this." We boarded the plane in silence. Halfway through the flight, he fell asleep with his head against my shoulder. The weight of it felt different than it used to, less comforting, more complicated. I stared out the window at the clouds and realized something painful. This was rock bottom, not because the relationship was ending, but because it was finally being seen clearly. And clarity hurts more than conflict ever does. The turning point didn't arrive with a grand apology or a dramatic gesture. It came quietly, the morning after that flight, when I woke up before Ryan and lay there listening to his breathing, steady and untroubled, while my chest felt tight with everything I'd been holding in. For the first time since the trip started, I asked myself a question I couldn't dodge anymore. If nothing changed, could I live like this for years? The answer came instantly. No. That morning, we walked through a crowded plaza near our hotel. Vendors were setting up stalls, tourists snapping photos, locals rushing past on their way to work. Life was moving forward around us, indifferent to our tension. Ryan stopped at a cafe window, pointing out pastries. "Which one do you want?" Normally, I would have deferred. Let him choose. Avoid friction. Instead, I said, "I want the almond one, and I'm ordering." He blinked, surprised. I stepped up to the counter, spoke clearly, imperfectly, and ordered in the local language. The barista smiled, corrected my pronunciation gently, and handed me the receipt. Ryan watched the whole thing. Outside, he said nothing for a moment. Then, "You didn't embarrass me." I met his eyes. I never did. Something shifted in his expression. Not defensiveness, not irritation, but discomfort. The kind that comes when a belief starts to crack. Later that day, we sat in a small park, coffee cups between us. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I told him how it felt, being corrected in public, blamed for his mistakes, treated like my voice was something to manage instead of value. I need you to hear this, I said. When you tell me to stay quiet, when you take over, when you blame me, you're telling me I don't belong beside you. I won't live like that. He stared at the ground for a long time. My parents were like this, he said finally. Everything had to be perfect. Any mistake was embarrassing. I think I learned to control instead of connect. That explains it, I said, but it doesn't excuse it. He nodded slowly. You're right. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was pleading to be understood. I felt like I was setting terms. I'm not leaving this conversation with promises, I continued. I need actions. I need you to let go of control, and I need you to respect me as an equal, or this won't work. He swallowed. I don't want to be the person who makes you feel small. Then don't be, I said, but it's on you to change. That was the moment I reclaimed my power, not by threatening to leave, but by making it clear I could. And he finally understood that this wasn't a fight he could win by dominating. It was one he could only survive by changing. The rest of the trip didn't magically transform into something perfect, but it did change. Not in sweeping gestures or dramatic apologies, in small, deliberate corrections that told me Ryan was actually listening this time. At dinner that night, when the waiter came to take our order, Ryan glanced at me instead of stepping in front of the moment. You want to go first? He asked. It was a simple question, but it landed heavy. I ordered in the local language again. Slowly, carefully. The waiter smiled, waited patiently, and nodded. When he left, I instinctively braced for criticism. Instead, Ryan smiled. That was sweet, he said. You really tried. I exhaled without realizing I'd been holding my breath. Over the next few days, he caught himself more often. When he started to interrupt, he stopped. When he made a face at something I said, he corrected it. Once, at a ticket booth, he began to take over, then paused and stepped back. Do you want to handle this? He asked. Yes, I said. And I did. Not everything went smoothly. There were moments when his old instincts surfaced. Tight shoulders, clipped tones. But now, when I looked at him, he saw it too. And when I spoke up, he didn't dismiss me. That mattered more than any apology. On our last night, we sat at the hotel bar, lights low, city humming beyond the windows. He turned his glass slowly in his hand. I've been thinking a lot, he said, about what you said, about how I treat you. I waited. I don't like who I was being, he admitted. I don't want to control everything, or you. I don't want to be the reason you feel small. Why do you think you do it? I asked. He was quiet for a long time. My parents, he said finally. Everything had to be perfect. Any mistake was embarrassing. I think I internalized that. And instead of dealing with my anxiety, I tried to manage you. I'm not a mistake, I said softly. I know, he replied, and neither are your imperfections. The words didn't fix everything, but they acknowledged the damage. When we flew home, we sat next to each other. Talked, really talked, about patterns, about control, about how easily love can slip into hierarchy if you don't guard against it. Back home, he didn't wait. He started looking for therapists. We found one who specialized in couples counseling. Weekly sessions, hard conversations, uncomfortable realizations. It wasn't easy, but it was honest. And honesty changed the fallout from destruction into reconstruction. It's been 3 months since that airport security line. 3 months since I was told, quietly, cruelly, that my voice was something to be managed. Something that embarrassed the person who claimed to love me. We didn't come home magically healed. What we came home with was awareness. Ryan followed through. He found a therapist. Then he asked if I'd be willing to go together. We started couples counseling once a week. The sessions weren't gentle. They peeled back habits we'd both normalized. His need for control, my tendency to go quiet until resentment built like pressure in a sealed room. He still struggles sometimes. Control doesn't disappear overnight. There are moments when stress hits and I can see the instinct flare in his eyes. But now, something is different. He stops himself. He apologizes without being prompted. He asks for my input instead of overriding it. And I speak up immediately instead of swallowing my words. Last week, we were at the airport again. Just a short weekend trip. Different terminal, different line, same fluorescent lights. At the check-in counter, there was an issue with our booking. Ryan started to step forward, then paused. He turned to me. "Do you want to handle this?" he asked. "You're better at this than I am." I smiled, stepped forward, explained the situation calmly, made a small joke that eased the tension. The agent laughed, fixed the issue in 5 minutes, and handed us our boarding passes. As we walked away, Ryan squeezed my hand. "Thank you," he said, "for being patient with me, for not giving up, for making me look at myself." I squeezed back. "Thank you," I replied, "for being willing to change." Our relationship didn't end in that airport. It was rebuilt there, because that was the moment I stopped accepting being made small, and he started taking responsibility for why he needed me to be. Here's the lesson I'd leave with anyone watching this. When someone tells you that you embarrass them, you have a choice. You can believe them and disappear, or you can demand they examine why they feel that way and whether it's fair. Sometimes the problem isn't you. Sometimes it's them. And sometimes, if they're brave enough to face it honestly, things can change. Love isn't about perfection, it's about respect. And respect means never asking the person you love to silence themselves so you can feel bigger. We're not the couple we were before that trip. We're more honest, more equal, more real. He doesn't tell me to be quiet anymore. And I don't stay quiet when something hurts. That's not a perfect ending, but it's a strong one.